Follow the buzzer. Rest in peace. Woo! The best there is, the best there was, and the best ever will be. What you gonna do, brother? Hey, yo.
Can you see me now?
Strategy my Oklahoma ass.
Life sucks, and then you die.
Welcome to the JM Report. I'm your host, GoodOlJM, and this is episode 58 on this May 10th, 2019, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And we kick off with a wild card rule. You know, when I first heard this, and I'll get to all the details in a bit, on paper, it seemed like a good idea for those who were or are Animaniacs fans. I was waiting for one of those good idea, bad idea segments. Well, for the most part, I'll admit, it seems like a good idea, on paper anyway. The bad idea is, well, as I'll get into, between the reviews of Raw and Smackdown, they broke their own rules less than 24 hours. Hell, they broke their own rules on the same night it was invented. And what made it worse, which will probably won't work long term if they keep this up, is making sure their storylines match into the next night. I think the timing of this was a little off, a little bad. Matter of fact, a lot bad because of their European tour. They started off in, I believe, in Ireland midweek, and then after the SmackDown roster was done in the States on Tuesday, everyone else joined up in London for the weekend, and that's when and where we're going to get the London shows for Raw and SmackDown this coming week. And, well, yeah, it was just bad timing this week. Had they waited, they could have waited till this week in London just to kick things off right away. That way everyone's available, whoever jumped back and forth. And I know there's a little bit more than that, a little bit more details in that, but I know I'm not the only one that thought this. There were so many comments all over the place on social media, but I want to chime in my voice, that being, if you're going to go this route with the wild card, I say open up the floodgates. So, for example, if you're going to have Roman Reigns, who's not a champion right now, jump back and forth, then have him finish off his feud with Drew McIntyre first off on Raw and then move on to someone else. And then return to SmackDown where he belongs because of the draft, have him feud with completely someone different. You know, maybe Samoa Joe for the U.S. title. No, I'm sorry, he's on Raw again. Who the hell's on SmackDown you can feud with? Well, anyone at this point. Point being, to open up the floodgates, it creates multiple angles and multiple feuds for a lot of people. And it might even bring up opportunities for the mid and lower card guys to be a part in said feuds. So, well, I mean, why not? Hell, if they can pull off Hulk Hogan versus Billy Kidman for a while there in WCW, even though it didn't last long, and even though a lot of it didn't make sense, but at least someone like me who's been a wrestling fan for so long can appreciate giving the opportunity to Billy Kidman to work with a big-time headliner such as Hulk Hogan. I mean, who wouldn't in their right minds that's been in the business for a couple of years, maybe ran through NXT for another year, call up to the main roster and, hey, pal, we're thinking of giving you an opportunity with this wild card rule that's going on. So whenever I don't know, besides Roman Reigns, maybe an AJ Styles, who's currently not a champion either. When he jumps to Raw, you can feud with him here, and then when he jumps back to SmackDown, he's feuding with I don't know, the B team. So that's one of the possibilities, one of the good possibilities and positives that can come from this. But, well, segueing into the Raw review, all of last weekend, pretty much since I dropped off episode 57, there were quote-unquote rumors of Roman Reigns that he was going to appear on Monday Night Raw despite being on SmackDown only, and that WWE.com and their social media pages went as far to say, nope, despite his request, Roman Reigns will not appear on Raw. On the Facebook side of things, I even chimed in. In other words, he's showing up. And I wasn't the only one. The majority of those comments and replies, like, whatever, he's showing up. Thank you. And sure enough, he did. After WWE put out yet another statement or comment, well, despite or attempting to not allow Roman Reigns to appear on Raw, he's insisted, and he will be on Monday Night Raw. As if we didn't already know. This is another example of them insulting the fans' intelligence. I mean, if you want to keep it kayfabe, then probably not have, because they did mention about, well, because of the draft or whatever thing they called it a few weeks ago now. You know, draft be damned, because not only him, but we're going to have so many people jumping back and forth. And again, I'll get into the details in a bit. As Vince McMahon, he opened up the show on Raw and promised that this will be a show that no one will ever forget. And of course, he gets interrupted by Roman Reigns, reminding Vince McMahon and all of his kids, including Triple H, although he was not mentioned by name, that they are no longer the authority. Didn't I mention this last week? Anyway, he's referring to the speech that all four made back in December of 2018, responding to the low ratings, responding how dull Raw is, in particular, how bad the shows have been getting. That the fans are the authority. And so much for SmackDown's greatest acquisition, because hell, so much for the draft, as I mentioned, because here he is, Roman Reigns, back on Raw, even if it is for 1 week only, or for now. So, as Vince tried to continue, Daniel Bryan makes his way to the ring without Rowan. And SmackDown is still Daniel Bryan's home post the draft. And Bryan thought he can have an intellectual conversation with Vince. And before Bryan could even get a word out of said intellectual conversation, Kofi Kingston comes down and interrupts. Yes, the WWE champion once again appeared on Raw. Last time was the night after WrestleMania, just nearly a month ago. So Kingston and Bryan get into an argument over the WWE title, only for Vince to interrupt and says he just had an epiphany. I think he tried to say stroke, but let's go with an epiphany, where he sees and he can have wild card matches and invite members of the roster from Raw and SmackDown to compete, and vice versa. And basically, Raw members can jump to SmackDown, and SmackDown members can jump to Raw, because here Vince kind of did like a little botch of his own, where Raw superstars can go to SmackDown, and SmackDown superstars can go to SmackDown. So yeah, I think he meant to say SmackDown go to Raw, but anyway. Kingston tried to shut down Vince's idea, only to be interrupted by Drew McIntyre. And McIntyre wanted to do something about all of this, people jumping to Raw, wants to do something about it, and was about to challenge Roman Reigns, and said that he's going to make 2 rematches from WrestleMania. That being Roman Reigns taking on Drew McIntyre, which was McIntyre's wish and what he was trying to do. And for the WWE title, Kofi Kingston will defend against Daniel Bryan. So essentially, we have a SmackDown Championship match taking place on Raw and an interpromotional match between Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre. So just when you thought the dust is settling, AJ Styles makes his way to the ring. They were really pulling out all the stops here on this one, as McMahon once again iterates that it will be a night that no one will ever forget. This comes after a a head writer was fired from Raw, and I'll get to that later. This had nothing to do with this, but over the weekend, or before Raw, matter of fact. I'll get to it. I got my notes here. One of the head writers from Raw was fired. So back from commercial, Styles and McMahon are in the ring as Vince explains once again the wild card rule of all the SmackDown superstars showing up, once again trying to explain to Styles and the rest of the audience. Seth Rollins makes his way to the ring. And this is where McMahon first mentions about 3 members of SmackDown can jump and three members from Raw can jump and vice versa to compete in whatever matches they set up for them. Rollins brings up the fact that he was sucker punched last week by Styles, as Styles reminded Rollins of his behavior when he was just looking at the Universal title and was trying to hand it back, and Rollins just basically snatches it away. I guess Styles took that as a declaration of war. So instead of having these two go one-on-one right there on the spot, Vince forced them to team up. And we will know their opponents, when we come back yet from another commercial break. And at this point, we're 25 minutes in. 4 minutes later from commercial, we see it's going to be Bobby Lashley, once again minus Lio Rush, and his partner, Baron Corbin. Seriously, whatever accolades Vince was hoping for was just shot between the eyes and buried 12 feet under. And just to be sure, just to make sure that you realize with the wild card nonsense, and we'll see how that goes next week in London. But I guess, in all fairness and to be honest, even though we have Baron Corbin yet again here being involved with top main event guys, this was not the main event of Raw. So this gets a pass somewhat. So by the time the bell actually rings, it's 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. In the beginning, Rollins and Styles basically try to outdo one another, and you can clearly see this should be a hell of a match between the two at Money in the Bank. There was actually one cringing moment. Actually, there were quite a few this week, but this one in particular, where Styles was setting up for the phenomenal forearm to springboard off the top rope from the apron. Lashley countered with a spear. So Styles never left. He never jumped off the apron. But Lashley came running across and speared Styles out of the ring, off the apron. And Lashley basically does a suicide dive and landed on his head, nearly, had he not put his hands out, basically into a handstand position. Who knows what would have happened? But thankfully and instinctively, Lashley reacted like, oh, shit, I'm about to land on my head. And the sound that his body made, it just, oh, man. He's a big dude. And you just don't want to see guys his size fall on his head and cause head and neck injuries. Oh, man, it was just hard to watch. So towards the end, we see Styles once again setting up for the phenomenal forearm, only this time aiming at Baron Corbin. Corbin ducks, and Styles accidentally hits Seth Rollins. So it was clearly an accident, but Styles just decided to, shrug his shoulders and like, well, okay, that happened, and leaves the ring, and Rollins high and dry. And this made Baron Corbin take advantage, delivering the end of days, and Corbin pinned the Universal Champion on Raw. By the way, by the time the bell rang to end the match, it was already 8:50. So In the first hour of a 3-hour show, we had only one match. The rest was filler. And this goes to me basically trying to say, you can get everything out what you want to say. You got to find a way to simplify it. Now, I get the time they take to hit your music, walk out to the ring, do your poses, whatever. Yeah, I get that. But taking that out of the equation. And also, it's a no-brainer. You have to kind of react to the crowd. If you're heel and they're booing the hell out of you, you let it sink in for a minute or two. But that's the problem. It's a minute or two that takes up where 15, 20 seconds would suffice. It's like, okay, I get it. And even if they try to talk over you, like, all right, let's give them another 5 to 10 seconds with this. If you go back to when Roman Reigns defeated The Undertaker from WrestleMania in Orlando, the next night on Raw, he was a hated man. And he was booed for nearly 10 minutes. All for him to say that it's his yard now. But every time he tried to raise the microphone to his mouth and speak, the boos got louder. The chants got more and more harsh. Because he knew he had, probably after the first few seconds, before the first minute was up, Roman Reigns, he knew he had the crowd in the palm of his hand. And he was just milking it. Maybe I milked it a little too long, but at the end, even though the fans tried to drown him out on the final attempt to raise the microphone to his mouth and speak, he said what he had to say and he left. It was a great moment, don't get me wrong, but thankfully it was just him in the ring and not being interrupted constantly. Then comes an authority figure and set up a match or as a challenge or whatnot. It was one phrase that took 10 minutes because the crowd reaction was just too much not to get as much out of as you can, especially for a wide live television audience. But for something like this, to on the spot come up with a, kayfabe, for on the spot to come up with a wild card rule and get more constant, more interruptions. And if McMahon was going to be on television, then why not have him throughout? But then again, they'll break the old previous rule about not having authority figures. Ironically, a rule that Roman Reigns brought up earlier. We see The Miz backstage, and he's sitting in his director's chair right outside Shane McMahon's locker room. So it's safe to say at this point that Shane can jump back and forth without any issues. This is probably where Vince got his idea from. And still, technically speaking, Shane is still an authority figure. But regardless, Miz, without saying a word, without being interviewed, just grabbed his chair and sat down and waited for Shane to show up. Sami Zayn makes his way to the ring. Let's see how long this one takes, bashing the fans. And he brings up everything that took place earlier, thinking that the fans will complain about it again, and that no one asked for it. So Sami mentioned he couldn't wait till tomorrow morning for the critics to complain about what happened earlier with the wild card situation. Then again, I think he meant to say during and after the show for the critics to start off complaining. But thankfully, this did not take too long because Braun Strowman interrupted. There's that word again. Making his way to the ring, and for what seemed to be a change of pace, Sami Zayn looked like he was going to stand his ground, only to find out that he was pretending and ran off like the heel coward that he is. Went through the crowd. Strowman tried to cut him off on the opposite side as he jumped over the barrier as well. And he caught up with Sami Zayn, being chased up the rampway, on the stage, and to the backstage area, where this segued. They were off camera. They were out of sight. Strowman and Zayn. And this segued into the Lucha House Party, making their way to the rings, as when the camera panned, showing that Strowman and Zayn were out of sight, same camera panned back, and all of a sudden you see 3 piñatas sitting on the stage as the Lucha House Party headed to the ring. But the camera cut back, and we see Sami Zayn trapped in the corner with one of those garage doors down. And it looked like he found a way to open it up because Strowman was right there, just about to strike, about to pounce on him. And then automatically, someone off camera decided to open up the gate for Zayn as he tried to crawl underneath. But Strowman was on hot pursuit, grabbing him by the ankles, picked him up, had him against the wall, and then lifts him over his shoulder and throws him into a dumpster. Which apparently sanitation works at this time of night. And the garbage truck came down and picked up said dumpster and tossed, assumingly, Sami Zayn with the rest of the trash in the back. And he was gone for the rest of the night, Sami was. But back in the ring, meanwhile, all three members of the Lucha House Party were involved in a 6-man tag with local talent, which I was unable to get their names. Nor were they mentioned by the ring announcer or the commentators. But this was short, quick work. As I'm sure these three local talents, wanted to be a part of the night. Vince McMahon doesn't want you to forget. But just not mention your names because not so much that they forget who they are or just didn't care. But thanks for coming. Here's your paycheck. Next up was Ricochet versus Robert Roode. Robert Roode conducted an interview backstage about that. He defeated Ricochet 2 weeks ago, and how did Ricochet get a spot in the Money in the Bank? So basically, Ricochet's spot was up for grabs here in this match. And if he were to lose it, Robert Roode would take his place in the Money in the Bank ladder match for the men. Well, Roode's been nearly absent for over a week. But before the match can even start, we see Naomi, Natalya, and then Dana Brooke, and eventually Alexa Bliss, but although she was mentioned later on, that they all received invitations to be ringside during Lacey Evans' match, and that she would have something to say. All right, we'll get there. Meanwhile, Miz is still waiting for Shane McMahon outside of his dressing room, still sitting on his director's chair. But back in the ring, oh yeah, there's a match. Ricochet waiting for his opponent, Robert Roode. But of course, Ricochet keeps his spot after delivering a 630 splash for the win over Robert Roode. We see Rey Mysterio backstage walking around with his son, Dominic, and I guess school is out early for him. And he runs into Heath Slater right outside Rey Mysterio's personal dressing room. And Mysterio asks for a bottle of water, and Dominic goes out to get one. And shortly after, because Rey goes into his locker room, Heath already said goodbye. He's gone. And Dominic walks towards the background. And the cameraman starts following him. And all of a sudden, you see Samoa Joe, not even 3 steps in, you see Samoa Joe follow and stalk Dominic. And we fade to commercial. I'm wondering, we all know how big Samoa Joe is. And again, trying to keep this kayfabe, how did Heath miss this giant of a man, Samoa Joe, that's holding a shiny gold belt, custom with red and blue highlights, whatever, over his shoulder, and you don't see him coming a mile away? But yet you send off your son. It was just bad directing. Where if the cameraman was going to follow Dominic, why couldn't Joe come from a different hallway, or come out through another door, heading from the same direction that Dominic was walking down? Because it looks bad. Where in the same shot, there's Rey, there's Slater, there's Dominic. Dominic just takes a couple of steps. Yeah, I'll be back, Dad. I'll get you your water bottle. And as soon as Rey and Slater are off screen, you see Samoa Joe walk in from the opposite side. So, yeah, it just didn't look right. I don't know if these are... I'm sure they work hard, but sometimes the delivery and production come out so amateurish. And in case you're wondering and asking, I think, yeah, I can do a much better job. So, challenge accepted. So anyway, we all expected that Joe would do something to Dominic. So we come back from commercial break. But surprisingly, Joe just gave a message to Dominic to deliver to his father, Ray. Joe catches up with Dominic and points out when he lifted his father over his shoulders last week, Joe took that as a sign of embarrassment, just like he embarrassed Rey Mysterio at WrestleMania. Joe did not let Dominic speak at all, and only to pass on a message that he's looking forward to defending his Universal. Wow, I'm so off today. Looking forward to defending his United States Championship at Money in the Bank. And that's it. We don't hear from Joe, Mysterio, or Dominic again in the show. So it was at this time that we see Lacey Evans have her match against another local talent. Again, no name, but it was short. It was a squash match as Evans got on the microphone after all the other representatives of Raw who will be a part of the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. You see Naomi, Natalya, Alexa Bliss, and Dana Brooke. So Lacey Evans basically gave a warning to these four women that if they were to win Money in the Bank and retrieve the briefcase, and that are even thinking of cashing in on Lacey Evans after defeating Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's title, there will be hell to pay, basically. This brought out Miss Two Belts, Miss Champ, Mrs. Becky Two Belts. And yes, Becky and Lacey Evans got into another brawl, although it wasn't as aggressive looking as the week before, where you had a bunch of referees and agents trying to break them up. This time it didn't last as long because Evans herself would leave on her own accord and walked away. And the other four women who were still there watching all this did not get involved. So nice little detail there, because why would you? Besides, it's a mix right now. Technically speaking, you have three baby faces and a heel that's representing Raw in the women's ladder match. So no one mentioned that they couldn't have a little brawl amongst themselves just to make things a little bit more interesting. You know, nah, I'm going to win the briefcase. No, I'm going to win the briefcase, and there's a little shoving match or something going on. But still, I mean, just standing there watching something they could have watched from backstage. Anyway, Daniel Bryan is backstage, and I thought he was going to be interviewed, but instead, it's one of these old-fashioned yelling at the camera promos, and shouted, or trying to discuss, how Kofi's shinning of merchandise and pancakes and so on, not being a worthy champion, and that he will win the WWE title from Kofi Kingston. Pretty basic stuff here, just the different tone, not different tone, but a different pace of things, where we don't see this every week. I think we should, maybe a couple of times, where the wrestler is not being interviewed, and rather it looks like he's just venting out frustration, or her, she, and not answer too many annoying questions. Like, what are your chances are tonight? Who do you think is going to win? How are you going to be like, who cares of all that? I'm going to go out there, rip this guy's head off, and kick his ass and win the title. That's it. You could ask a question along those lines. So, how you feel, Daniel Bryan? Tonight's your night to win back the WWE Championship that you lost back at WrestleMania against the very same man in Kofi Kingston. Your thoughts? Might come across a little 1950-ish, but you know what? It's different. And again, it's not something we see all the time, which I think we should. The Viking Raiders took on Raw Tag Team Champions Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins in a non-title match. But then we segued, because God forbid we can see the entrances for participants of said match, but not started right away, because we got something else to get to. As the Usos were sneaking out of the men's locker room acting very suspicious, but we get back to the ring as the match was underway, and it looks like we're going to get a repeating trend, I should say. A little tongue-tie, I need some water. where the Raw Tag Team Champions, in this case, Hawkins and Ryder, will go on a long non-title losing streak until Vince or creator finally decide to have them be a part of a decisive match, non-title or otherwise, and against a team worthy of being the champions, and defend them once in a while. They did the same thing with the Revival, and when they finally defended the titles, they dropped them at Mania to Ryder and Hawkins. Here we are a month later. Either they were off TV for a couple of weeks or they were seen backstage, but maybe on an episode of Main Event, which I'll cover later. But you don't have the Raw. They're called the Raw Tag Team Champions, and they're not on Raw. At least the Raw Women's Champion appeared on Raw, even though if it was for a brief cameo. Couldn't say the same for the next night, but they were out for more than one obvious reason. And it was time for the Firefly Funhouse, where we see Bray Wyatt approach the box where Mercy the Buzzard is in, and not the voice itself, but how it sounded, the distortion that they used. Now, let me see if anyone can follow me. But did anyone ever have the Snake Mountain playset from back in the day, the original, where it basically folds open and you got basically double playset? And because it's called Snake Mountain, in the cartoon, it was literally a giant statue snake wrapped around a mountain, and at the mouth was basically the throne room for Skeletor. But anyway, the playset was completely different, where the snake part of it was a microphone, and when you spoke into it, you can obviously hear yourself talk, like, "I'm gonna get your He-Man," but at the same time, the other side of the playset, the mountain itself was shaped to, in a real gruesome looking face, and you're able to manage to move the mouth. So there was a lever where you're almost basically becoming a what do you call him? What David Dunham is, ventriloquist, and you can make it seem like as if your voice is speaking through the mountain. But anyway, that's what it sounded like to me. I don't know if anyone had one on the side and actually had the Waylon Mercy impersonator, or just might be Waylon Mercy himself. Who knows? Because he gave away who this character is based on. Mercy the Buzzard, obviously. Waylon Mercy, hello. And he says, you know what I mean? So what happened was Bray Wyatt is asking what he's doing, because we see all the stuffings in his mouth. We see stuffings around the box. So Bray Wyatt reaches in and pulls out Rambling Rabbit, or at least what was left of him, because Mercy Buzzard was eating him. And Mercy was forgiven by Bray Wyatt, because basically Mercy was being annoyed by Rambling Rabbit. So because he was forgiven, Bray Wyatt turns his attention to these children who magically appeared sitting on the floor, blankly staring into the abyss, into the unknown. So some of them were wearing masks, others were just staring to nowhere. And we were told later on that Bray Wyatt, on this coming week's episode of the Firefly Funhouse, will reveal what his intentions are and any secrets he may be holding. So we're going to find out for sure if he's going to be a babyface or heel heading forward. For all we know, he'll probably appear in the actual, what's it called, the C2 Arena, O2 Arena in London, and pick out his next feud with whomever it's going to be. Rollins, we see backstage being interviewed, and gave warning to Styles about walking away from him again, and that next time when he does, it will be with two black guys and a broken arm and face. I get it, trying to keep it PG. So it was a rematch from WrestleMania, Roman Reigns taking on Drew McIntyre, and this is essentially Raw versus SmackDown, as these two had a much better match, I believe, from WrestleMania. Roman hits the spear and was about to pin McIntyre, but once again, he is saved. McIntyre does not get pinned. He's saved by Shane and Elias from SmackDown to jump in the ring after coming through the crowd attacking Roman Reigns. However, The Miz would run down and chase away Shane McMahon with a steel chair. But back in the ring, we see Elias and McIntyre continue to attack Roman Reigns after delivering a Claymore kick and left Roman Reigns laying. Backstage, we see the chase continuing between Miz and Shane. Shane ducks away and loses Miz and somehow made his way down to a lower level where the parking lot is and is awaiting limo. So before Shane tries to get in, off camera and off around the corner, we see Miz attack Shane with a steel chair a few times. He beat him down on the limo, in front of the limo, away from the limo, back with the steel chair again. As Shane was trying to escape, delivered a low blow to The Miz and shoved him off to the side, jumps in the limo, and he rides off. The Good Brothers, Anderson and Gallows, were going to take on the Revival. But before the match could begin, there's that phrase again, the Usos interrupt and walk out on stage. And it turns out the Usos replace the Revival's Icy Hot with Usi Hot. Okay. And we all started to notice the Revival were fanning themselves with their jackets, with their vests, as they were sweating profusely already, even before the match even began. And that the Usi Hot is moisture activated. So in other words, the more they sweat, the hotter it gets. So they were trying to take off their jackets, trying to cool off, and the Usos were holding up water bottles, which the Revival did come out of the ring and walk up the rampway to receive. And they doused themselves with the water bottle. And the Usos, when they see that the water bottle ran out, telling the Revival, no, you just made things worse. As we said, this is moisture activated, so you're just going to make yourself a lot more hotter. So, forgot to mention that in the ring we see, I believe it was Scott Dawson, who took off his jacket and started put the jacket in between his legs and basically started rubbing himself back and forth with said jacket. And I don't know how, if my upper thigh was burning like that, the last thing I want to do is rub leather against it. But anyway, but more focus was obviously on their genitalia and in their sphincters, because they doused the water bottles down their trunks. And you see Wilder roll around as if he was literally on fire. And Dawson was dragging his ass across the stage like a dog with worms up his ass. So the match never happened. I don't even think you could even call this a known contest. It just didn't happen. If the stories are to be believed that, and I mentioned this last week, that both members of the Revival were offered about a $500,000 contract for the next 5 years, I believe it was. They turned it down. And by the way, there's no update on that, but they supposedly turned it down. So I don't know if the Revival's thinking here is, and this is only my assumption, that they're going to wait until their current contract expires. More than likely going to have the contracts extended because they were both on hiatus or injuries, but both of them at the same time were away from television, similar to Luke Harper having that time added back on. And just going to wait things to ride out, have their contracts officially expire, where they're not going to have any more basically responsibilities to the WWE whatsoever, so they could walk. And if they want to, let's say, for example, if the contract expires today for the Revival, they could be on a different show by Monday. Hell, they can have booking shows this weekend, just not WWE affiliated. I'm not sure what to think of all this with the Usos, we caught them shaving each other's back. And now here we are having their balls set on fire because of Usi Hot. So, on a night we'll never forget, right, Vince? To revert back to toilet humor and men dragging their asses across your stage, which I'm sure is not that cheap. Let me just move on. So now it's Kofi Kingston's turn to yell at the camera. The impossible has become possible after winning the WWE title, Kofi Kingston says, and he will retain and defeat Daniel Bryan. No Way Jose makes his way to the ring with his dancing entourage. And since we were discussing brand jumping, No Way Jose seemed to have been on loan from the main event. When was the last time we saw him on Raw? But speaking of brand jumping, we see Lars Sullivan return to Raw and attack on No Way Jose and members of the entourage, which had to have been, again, local talent. He attacks a male dressed in hot dog. I believe he was wearing a hot dog suit. And he gets a spine buster across the edge of the railing, where the two corner railings meet from ringside and the rampway area. That had to have sucked for that guy. I mean, yeah, the railings are padded, but still, it's the edge of the railings. I mean, that could not have been a good feeling. We see the superhero in zebra shorts. He gets tossed into the ring, but by this time, No Way Jose returned, and he follows Sullivan into the ring, only to be attacked once again. And a man in a green kilt and orange shorts underneath, he gets tossed out of the ring, and Sullivan turns his attentions back to Jose, delivering a running sit-out powerbomb, and left just all members of the entourage laid out. There were female members, but they ran away when the attack took place. So, at this point, they broke their own rule of only having three members of the Smackdown brand jumping over, because we had Daniel Bryan, we had Roman Reigns, and we had Kofi Kingston. Conveniently, we cut away to Vince in his office, talking to someone on the phone, bragging about his intelligence about the wild card rule and how it's going to work, saying that Elias didn't count because he was with Shane McMahon. But of course it didn't count, of course. So what about Lars Sullivan? Well, he bangs on the door, walks into frame. Vince is all about shitting his pants. He's scared to death. He's frightened. Tells the person on the phone they're calling back. But not before he's saying that, yeah, instead of 3, let's have 4 members of the roster jump back and forth. Because apparently Sullivan, before the rule was broken and or changed, kayfabe, he wasn't supposed to be there. So hopefully apparently that did satisfy Sullivan, as he calmly walked away, and we see McMahon give the giant big gulp swallow down his throat. So here we go. Main event time for the WWE Championship. Kofi Kingston defending against Daniel Bryan. Of course, Kofi is victorious. He retains the WWE Championship. There were rumors up to this point, so I was a bit concerned if there were going to be any changes heading into Money in the Bank, because originally it was going to be a triple threat match for the title at Money in the Bank. Kingston defending against Kevin Owens and Daniel Bryan. But apparently that all changed, most likely due to the injury of Daniel Bryan, which again remained disclosed. No one knew what it was or how long he would be out. But here, I guess, just to get out of the way at the same time, like, well, he was promised or at least written to have a title match. Let's have it right here and right now before we head to London and before we get to Money in the Bank, which is next Sunday. Get that out the way. So Bryan had his rematch. It wasn't successful, but that would not be the end of Bryan, as we will find out heading into SmackDown. So let's see which 4 Raw superstars are going to jump. And they wasted no time, as we had the return of AJ Styles kicking it off. Too bad the same rule cannot apply to NXT or 205 Live members, although they can, since 205 and SmackDown pretty much travel together, but only Raw and SmackDown. So Styles here explains what the rule is again, only to be interrupted by the second Raw superstar of being Sami Zayn, and noticeably in his wrestling gear for the first time since his injury of double shoulder injury, double surgery, I should say, for the shoulders. It was a real crazy time. Almost back to back, Kevin Owens had double knee surgery. So yeah, real tough time for those guys. But thankfully they're all back and healthy and good to go. So I guess he quickly washed off all the trash off of him from the night before, as he showed no signs of some kind of selling job here, being dropped into a dumpster. I would think he would have banged your head on a boulder or something. Who knows what people throw out nowadays. But Styles, I guess, as kayfabe would be, try to keep it interesting. Because even though we see Sami Zayn nice and clean, Styles pointed out how much he stunk. And the fans began chanting, "Take a shower," which I thought was funny. But this brings out Kofi Kingston and the returning Xavier Woods. And I thought immediately they were going to set up a tag team match here. Xavier Woods and Kingston versus Styles and Sami Zayn. But no, instead Kofi Kingston challenges either one. Well, at this point, I should point out that a lot of superstars had already left for the European tour, specifically heading towards Ireland. And Smackdown had to carry on its own, and basically a handful of superstars. So again, the timing was bad, but then again, it could have been good depending, because if you want to get those numbers up, you might want to loan a couple of big name Raw superstars. So either way, no Roman Reigns on the show, no Drew McIntyre, no Seth Rollins, nothing. So it turned out we're going to get a triple threat match instead, as Kofi Kingston defended his WWE Championship back-to-back nights on Raw and then SmackDown versus Sami Zayn versus AJ Styles. We see Kevin Owens in a cell phone video mentioning that he is not at SmackDown because it's his birthday and that he was already on the London tour. First match of the night, we see Ali taking on Andrade, in which I thought these two had a great match, only to be ruined by the run-in from Randy Orton. He came through the crowd and attacked both Ali and Andrade, causing a double DQ. But the table soon turned as Orton tried to deliver the DDT draped across the second rope. But Selena Vega would grab Andrade's ankle, preventing this, and Ali came in to gain the advantage. But Orton would once again turn the tables, delivering a mid-air RKO to Ali as he bounced off the ropes and popped him up, where Randy Orton did, and caught him on the way down with an RKO. Andrade would jump off the top rope to attack Randy Orton with a springboard, but once again, Orton would catch him in the RKO, leaving both men laid out, and they were all part of the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. As mentioned last week, the Hardy Boys unfortunately had to surrender the SmackDown Tag Team Championships due to Jeff Hardy's injury, and will be out for, at the very most, 9 months. So Shane, it was announced during the weekend that Shane will present the titles to the new champions, apparently of his choosing. And without an official announcement, out comes Daniel Bryan and Rowan. And I say unofficial because Shane, let's just meet who these guys are. And just before they were about to be presented with the physical belts, the Usos. Okay. So we had AJ Styles and Sami Zayn jump from Raw to SmackDown. Here are the Usos. So that should be 4, right? Or does the Uso tag team count as 1? Well, we'll get back to that. So the Usos interrupt, returning to SmackDown after a few weeks only post-draft, because why not? And they argue that the Daniel Bryan Rowan team have to earn the championship belts, not just be handed to them. So basically, Shane agrees to this, and he makes a match right there on the spot, the Usos versus Daniel Bryan and Rowan. Now, I immediately knew what the outcome was going to be. But before we get into that, we segue into Finn Balor who apparently did a little cell phone video himself, and he's already in Ireland, his hometown, and is indicating that he will be winning the men's Money in the Bank ladder match and become a 2-time champion. Well, in this case, Finn 2 belts. Actually, that sounds a nice ring to it, just as Becky 2 belts. But Finn 2 belts, why not? So back in the match for the the vacant SmackDown Tag Team Championships. And all I'm going to say is, had the turnout ended the way most people would have hoped, it would have caused some kind of ruckus or monkey wrench thrown in the entire system. But this was a hell of a match, I got to admit. But it was Bryan delivering the running knees into Jey Uso outside the ring after the Usos attempted a double suicide dive onto Rowan, but he catches both men, actually. And he tosses Jey towards Bryan, delivering the double knees. Jimmy Uso gets thrown back into the ring. He gets delivered the Iron Claw Slam for the pin and win. So now your new SmackDown Tag Team Champions are Daniel Bryan and Rowan. And it's funny because Bryan will make mention of this later on backstage. How long before we start seeing Hemp SmackDown Tag Team Championships? Because, why not? He's a vegan. So funny that we don't have any authority figures, but Roman Reigns pointed this out the night before on Raw. But Shane, in a affirmative position, maybe, was about to hand over the titles, but made a match out of it anyway. But regardless, we segue into a repeat of the Firefly Funhouse. But Shane McMahon was still in the ring as we cut back to him. And we see both Money in the Bank briefcases from the men and women set up on their respective podiums or stool chairs. And the announcers were going to say, well, Shane's about to add something or tweak a little bit about both ladder matches. But we never got to hear what it was. But again, no authority figures, but here's a guy who's about to make some changes to 2 freaking matches. But Shane gets attacked from behind by The Miz as he came through the crowd, and the fight will go up the rampway to the stage, only to be saved by the B Team. Ironically, the old Mistourage attacking their former protege or master. But somehow The Miz was able to fight off the B Team and was about to focus his attention back to Shane. But before he can turn around, Shane returned with a steel chair, hitting Miz across the back, essentially returning the favor from the night before, and The Miz was laid out. We see Daniel Bryan and Rowan run into Heavy Machinery backstage, and clearly we see that the Heavy Machinery has received a change. They were no longer in their singlets, but they were both wearing jean vest with the sleeves cut off. I mean, in fairness, it wasn't a wide enough shot, but it was from the waist up, basically. But we didn't see the traditional Heavy Machinery singlets, but wearing jean vests is an indication that they made some changes to their characters and appearance. So we may or may not see that sometime soon, hopefully. But more importantly, maybe a feud between these 2 teams. Why not? Ember Moon and Carmella team up to take on Sonya Deville and Mandy Rhodes. Rose? That's Rose. I said Rose. Yeah. Mandy Rose. But towards the end, Mandy Rose was about to be delivered a suicide dive via Ember Moon to the outside of the ring. But Sonya Deville sacrificed herself, basically taking the bullet, pushing Rose out of the way. As Rose took advantage of this and threw Ember Moon back into the ring and delivered a double underhook facebuster for the win. Shortly after, we see Paige step on stage with her team of Asuka and Kairi Sane, challenging both Deville and Rose to next week to a match in London. Matt Hardy was being interviewed backstage, confirming Jeff Hardy's surgery was successful, and he was joined by R-Truth. and I believe it was Charlie Caruso that was interviewing them. And all of a sudden, she looks behind them and looks back at the guys, and she runs off. And the camera zooms out a little bit, and we see it's Lars Sullivan back on SmackDown attacking both men. So Matt Hardy gets thrown through a side door, might have been an emergency side door of the arena. And R-Truth gets thrown through a conveniently placed table right next to the interview section. And both men were laid out, and as Sullivan just walks away. We hear from Aleister Black once again, warning everyone on SmackDown and apologizes in advance for seeking absolution and victory from his opponents. So finally, we get to the main event, triple threat for the WWE Championship, AJ Styles versus Sami Zayn versus champion Kofi Kingston. There was another cringing moment here. Kofi Kingston added somewhat an aerial assault to his arsenal, where he delivers a body splash basically across his opponent's back, but his opponent is in a standing position, but a bit bent over. He did the same move the night before on Daniel Bryan and came across nicely, and no one was hurt by it. But here, at first I thought AJ Styles was on his left knee. After the replay was shown once only, they were about to show it a second time, but somebody changed their minds. So Kofi Kingston jumps off the top rope, makes contact with Styles' back. Now, who knows what happened, what went wrong here, whether Styles was supposed to take a face bump or maybe drop down to all fours, but even then it would be a horrific looking move. But no, what happened was Kofi Kingston does make contact with Styles' back. Styles does not take a face bump. Instead, his upper body, his torso, banged against his right knee, while his other leg was already, stretched out, looking like he was about to take a half a body face bump, if that makes sense. So immediately, the referee stepped in and checked on Styles. He didn't say anything right away, but as the match went on, we clearly saw Styles limping around. So if it's not his lower back or his knee hit itself, who knows? Towards the end, we see Kevin Owens actually run down and attack Xavier Woods. So apparently Owens lied to everyone. No shock there. And caused a distraction for Kofi Kingston. AJ Styles was taken out by a Trouble in Paradise from the apron on the other side. And Sami Zayn took advantage of this after delivering 3 Blue Thunder Bombs, but could not put Kofi Kingston away, showing here how much of a strong competitor Kingston has become. And one Trouble in Paradise later, Kingston was able to pin and retain the WWE title, pinning Sami Zayn. And of course, there was an idea, what if Styles won the WWE title here and would be champion versus champion? We just saw that. What are you talking about? In another attempt of winner take all at the night after WrestleMania, but whatever. Kingston retains, and it's still Kevin Owens versus Kofi Kingston for the title at Money in the Bank, and it's still AJ Styles versus Seth Rollins for the Universal title. So I'm going to include here the main event review that took place right before Raw went on the air, and I got to correct myself here. Even though these main event portions do not make it to the network, at least for another month. And I completely forgot about this. Main event is available on Hulu Plus. What I'm not sure is if it's live, but it definitely is available the day of main event. And only 2 matches were recorded for this night, as Cedric Alexander defeated EC3. That would have been a great match on Raw, but no, we got a wild card to deal with. And one half of the women's tag team champions, Peyton Royce, defeated Nikki Cross, which I hope she'll have at least some time to shine during the London tour coming up. But why? Stupid booking. Over at 205 Live, we find out that Tony Nese, the WWE Cruiserweight Champion, will defend the title at Money in the Bank. Money in the Bank versus Arya Daivari. Meanwhile, Daivari was in a match versus Noam Dar, and champion Tony Nese was sitting ringside by the commentator's table. Daivari was able to gain the advantage on Dodd to take him down with a vicious hammerlock lariat for the victory. After the match, Nese jumped into the ring, giving the scare to Daivari before laughing at him and just walking away. The Singh brothers took on David Kaufman and Kevin Lee in a tag team match, in what turned out to be a very short match, as the Singh brothers were the winners, mainly from a beatdown, and got the pin to win. And after the match, the Singh brothers got on the microphone and called out the Lucha House Party, challenging them to a rematch in the near future. Akira Tozawa took on Mike Kanellis in a no disqualification match. Tozawa grabbed a series of steel chairs and went to the top rope, where he dropped down onto Kanellis and pinned him for the victory. So a lot of great action taken on 205 Live. Unfortunately, after a while, I just can't keep up with so much WWE programming, but thankfully there are results to go over and find online, and even highlights on YouTube, so it's all good. So I gave my thoughts about the wild card rule, the pluses and negatives for them. So even before this was announced, it was basically an experiment, because after the debate whether or not Roman Reigns was going to show up, and the added bonus of unannounced superstars jumping back and forth between the two brands, how did this affect the ratings? Well, according to Showbuzz Daily, Raw average viewership rose to a 2.2 this week versus last week's 2.1. So clearly, they needed to do something, WWE, in order to raise at least some of these numbers. And the introduction to the wildcard idea, as well as the Roman Reigns appearance, looked like it worked. Over on Smackdown, this week, it slightly rose to a 1.9 versus last week's number at 1.8. So a bit of improvement here, although Raw is still the main focus show. If the idea was to send over Roman Reigns to try to raise that number up past 2 million for SmackDown, I don't know. I really don't know what else they can do. They're trying everything, I'll give them that, but doesn't change the fact that a lot of their product, a lot of their stories suck. Let's face it, they suck. So we'll see what happens next week, where everything's in place as opposed to the wild card rule, and see who jumps back and forth. But the Wrestling Observer has a story in connections to this wild card rule thing and what's going on with the ratings and WWE, even though ratings don't matter, pal. Well, according to a recent report from said Wrestling Observer newsletter, one of the reasons for the changes lately on WWE television is because they feel pressure from their TV networks to improve dwindling ratings. It's no secret that the viewership hasn't been that great in recent weeks. That's being kind. But mainly due to the nature of the programming. Exactly. They supposedly want to add as much star power as they possibly can to both shows without bringing the brand split to a complete end. And with that in mind, it'll be interesting to see how the book telling thing goes on moving forward. But I don't know how much more I can personally beat this into the ground, And for the surveys that they put out, WWE does, I don't get them anymore. But instead of, what bothers you? What do you want to see more? How about asking what changes would you like to have take place backstage with management or maybe creative or anything? And again, I don't want to go down that road again, but, fuck it, it's my show. These writers need to get their heads out of their asses and stop worrying about, I wonder if this is going to make Vince McMahon happy, or would he like it enough to put it on TV? Just write. You're writers, aren't you, men and women? You're a creative team somewhat, though I don't think that's the official title for them. But if you are writers, if you were hired from college or you're on internship or whatever it is, but you're categorized as a writer. So yes, pressure is on you to come up with as many ideas as possible on a weekly basis and have it continue it on, of course, to keep it making sense, keep up pace with it, to have a beginning, a middle, and an end before you do it all over again with a different set of characters. Do your job, boo-boo. Don't worry about what the boss is going to say. And hell, put your foot down, because I'm pretty sure you're not getting paid enough as it is anyway. So put your foot down and say, well, this is the absolute best I can come up with. So, Vince McMahon, last I heard, you're not a writer. Maybe a quote creative genius, but when was the real actual last time Vince McMahon himself came up with an idea that made it to air and brought the ratings up, or maybe interest enough where it brought back fans the following week? Not too many. Then again, he changes a lot of stuff on the fly, a lot of stuff at the last minute. So writers, present what you wrote to the boss, say, boss, and convince them, speak up, damn it. This is what I wrote. This is what rewrote. This is what me and the team came up with together. And if it plays out this way, that way, and this way, it's going to work because you're the freaking writers. And all Vince has to do is either say yes or no. Okay, go back, make necessary tweaking changes a little bit where it's barely unnoticeable to the naked eye, at least when you're reading it, and go back to say, hey, okay, we made the changes. Here you go. That's better. Go with that. Vince, I mean, hey, I'm not questioning his intelligence like he does with ours. But after a while, I think you get to know the guy enough to say, like, well, I know what he likes, I know what he doesn't like. But if you're doubting yourself, I don't know if he's going to like this, then you shouldn't be there. Give someone else that opportunity. Hell, which I'll get into a little bit here about that writer that got fired. Well, like Vince McMahon always said, well, don't piss people off. But in lighter news for Vince, the XFL announced their 2020 season, and they will air weekly on both broadcast and cable networks, including the championship game that will air on ESPN. The season will kick off on February 8th, 2020, and the league's game will air on ABC and Fox, along with complimentary games on cable such as ESPN, ESPN2, FS1, and FS2. Unfortunately, not everyone has all of these networks, as cable companies have been changing their tiers throughout the years. So if you get ESPN, then you probably won't get Fox Sports, and vice versa. Or it could be combined, but it's going to be a bigger package where you're going to pay out more. But point being, not everyone's going to get all these networks, and not everyone's going to get to watch all these games, as once upon a time, the original XFL season were available for everyone. But either way, I think it's very interesting, and it's a good way to approach this. Hey, you want to watch, you're that curious, you're that much of a fan, then you'll go out of your way to make that extra purchase of these cable network companies and add them onto your cable channel. So the XFL TV schedule will feature 2 Saturday afternoon games starting at 2 p.m., as well as 2 additional games on Sunday afternoons. So the agreements were negotiated by the CAA Sports and Evolution Media Capital on behalf of the league, as ESPN EVP Burke Magnus and Fox Sports CEO Eric Shanks also commented on the announcement, praising the vision of the Football League's return and its season, and how it will be provide key programming. But according to the Sports Business Journal Daily, both ESPN and Fox will pick up production costs that value around $400,000 a game, and will sow ads around the game while the league handles sponsorship at the venues in which the games are played. The Wall Street Journal also chimed in, echoing this, and noted that ESPN and Fox will also be holding streaming rights to the XFL games as well. Both outlets noted no cash is changing hands on the deal. So somehow this all worked out before a single game was even aired on television. So kudos to those involved. WWE is not directly involved, even though the owner and founder of the XFL is Vince McMahon. But he finally did the right thing as making these two separate entities. I really doubt on the opening game, the opening segment of the games, you're not going to see The Rock walk midfield and yell out, "Do you smell what the XFL is cooking?" or whatever. They tried it. It was the finishing blow after receiving, nearly 10 million viewers, only to drop week by week. And by the time he got to the championship $1 million game, you literally could have paid $1 to each viewer at that point, because that was how many viewers were left from the 10 million that started it. Ronda Rousey was the guest on Stephen Colbert's show this week on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, saying that she needed to get better at faking, meaning, or I should say, referring to her broken hand. And we now know exactly when the spot happened. As she described, she sustained it during her match at WrestleMania in a triple threat with Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair, where she threw a table and yelled out, yelling out the tables off for bitches. So in other words, I believe it was Charlotte Flair that introduced the table. It was already set up in the corner, and Ronda threw out the table. She threw it away. And that was the spot when and where she broke her hand. She didn't share any more detail into that, but at least Stephen Colbert was able to autograph Ronda Rousey's cast for Good Sport. Also didn't mention when she returned to in-ring action. But then again, she's going to go out there and make some babies. So here we go. The Raw writer that was fired from the company. This, as reported by Fightful, as Ryan Callahan has been fired by the WWE. It was said to be an issue that Callahan and Rajin Singh, who goes by Dave Kapoor backstage, Kapoor was on the belief that Ryan took creative changes too personally and was generally a pretty difficult person to get along with and work alongside. As a result, the company decided he was deemed not to be setting a good example for the remainder of the team, and was officially fired last week on Thursday. So he never got to see the wild card nonsense. And I doubt he even got the old "wish you well in your future endeavors." As mentioned, for the past couple of weeks, NXT will have another takeover show, but now we know where it would be, as Triple H finally announced that NXT TakeOver 25, indicating its 25th edition of TakeOver, will be taking place in Bridgeport, Connecticut at the Webster Bank Arena. The show will mark the 25th official TakeOver event, with the location very much coming out of nowhere, many believe, as well as knowing that NXT usually organizes a TakeOver show alongside a WWE pay-per-view, but this time they're on their own. And I think this is a beyond a great idea, because for the longest time, it's always been compared. Oh, NXT show was much better. The TakeOver show was much better than WrestleMania, or much better than Money in the Bank or the Royal Rumble. Here's their chance, not only for NXT but for WWE, because WWE, they don't have there's no TakeOver show next to Money in the Bank that weekend, obviously. But here's the chance to follow that, so to speak, like in the words of Shawn Michaels, follow that. But also a time for NXT to stand on their own. Like, well, there was no competition. Literally, I don't think there will be, unless there's a bunch of independent shows the night of and after, or maybe even the night before. And those fans who attend all of those shows, they have a chance to compare it. But for a wider audience, we won't. And give WWE a break from being compared to NXT so much. But it's going to happen. The next one's going to be around SummerSlam anyway. So the next one after that is Survivor Series. So unless they're going to add more and more separate NXT TakeOver shows, which hopefully they won't do every month or every other month or every season or whatever their plan is. But at the end of the day, more than likely, they're going to be compared regardless to WWE. So even though it will be a few weeks apart, but TakeOver 25 will more than likely be compared to the Money in the Bank as far as who had the better show. And by the way, no matches were announced as of yet, but I'm sure as the NXT TV show goes on, we'll find out more and more information. So the WWE Network, changes are coming, as so many words, a reboot, if you will, is expected sometime in September or late 2019. But at the WWE Business Partners Summit, officials revealed that a few upcoming tidbits about their future media plans. And perhaps most interesting is the confirmation of a relaunch of the WWE Network later this year. Again, rumored to be around September. And the WWE has been asking the fans about the possibilities of tiered service for quite some time now. And this seems to confirm all of this. And from the summit, also confirming this possibility. The officials at the summit noted that the new WWE Network will have multiple tiers and new content, quote, customizations of some sort, and downloading for offline viewing and other features. So they're following what Netflix has been doing. They're going to follow what Hulu has been doing, and even most recently YouTube has been doing. There's also word that not all, but a great amount of YouTube Red will be free sometime next year. For those who've been following Cobra Kai, season 3 has been announced and will take place. The ending of season 2 was like, holy shit, kind of, but that's just me, not to give spoilers. But when season 3 was announced, shortly after, the rumors, and so far that's how I'm taking it, and that's how I'm going to present it, as only rumors, that season 3 and some or most YouTube Red will be available for free. But time will tell. What could be in those tiers is anyone's guess for right now, even though, again, mentioning the series earlier, there were mentions about other promotions such as Shine, Shimmer, the WWN, ICW, among others. Pretty much organizations in other territories that WWE has affiliation with or a working relationship with, which could be seen as other developmental areas. And they always have shows throughout the country, especially WWN and Shimmer. And here's a possibility and a chance that they could be telecast or broadcast, I should say, streaming on the WWE Network by the end of the year. Netflix recently raised their pricing, their original pricing, I believe, is up to $12.99, I believe. The original was $7.99, now it's up to $12 because they're trying to present as much value and content with their own original movies and TV shows, which makes sense. Curious to see exactly the extra money, and you know it's going to be extra money for whichever tier you pick. And I'm pretty sure the current $9.99 tier is going to raise up maybe a buck or two. So get ready for that. So a little bit on update of Lio Rush here. And he has been in hot water apparently and was originally advertised, but then pulled from the upcoming European tour. So according to Pro Wrestling Insider, Rush was not backstage this week on Raw and is currently not slated to be part of the European tour for the company. While the wrestler is still under contract with the company, it doesn't seem like the WWE has any plans for him or any time in the near future. As mentioned, Rush recently criticized the WWE in its handling of traveling expenses and has been the center of various rumors. And fans will likely have to wait before any more information comes out of the light to pretty much put this thing to bed, sort of thing. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But the funny thing is, and I may mention a lot of this of what Lio Rush had to say, he never denied any of these accusations, which is interesting. And with that said, does this paint even more of a bad picture of Lio Rush? Well, dude, they said this and that about you. You're not denying it, but at the same time, you're in offensive mode. I don't know Lio Rush personally. I never had the opportunity to meet the man at a meet and greet or whatnot. He does have his own family to provide and put food on the table, pay bills, all that good jazz. But it's almost difficult to defend him as an outsider, where, again, he didn't deny anything that was said about him, and he did give in his side of the story of things. Whether it was a big deal that he didn't want to pass around water or towels or whatever they needed during a previous tour to all the veterans. And I remember Aleister Black, when Roman Reigns first mentioning his diagnosis of leukemia back in October, and that Aleister Black put out this lengthy comment or statement about Roman Reigns, and that he shared a personal story where Aleister Black was still doing the same thing Lio Rush doesn't want to do, of passing around water bottles and towels and whatnot to the veterans. And it was Roman Reigns who walked up to him and said, "Hey, dude, you're one of us. You can stop doing that." And how much more admiration and respect Aleister had for Roman Reigns at that point on, along with wishing him well and getting well soon and to come back to the WWE. But that's all I'm going to say about Lio Rush. It's a damn shame. He is very talented. He can, as one of the old saying goes, fly loop-de-loops around people. He can dance around anyone, wrestle around anyone in the ring if put it in with the right opponent. But this kind of stuff, it's difficult to defend. And hopefully cooler heads prevail, and then Lio Rush, behind the scenes, it's not trying to find a way to get released because of his attitude or his behavior, and use that as an excuse to go somewhere else. Tyler Breeze, things weren't working out for him exactly. He was sent back to NXT. Why can't they do that with Lio? Just a thought. So, last month, Ryan Satin reported that backstage of the Sasha Banks and Bayley tantrum, and that they were, Sasha more than Bayley was on the hotel floor on the hallways, just fussing and tussing around like a little baby, after finding out that they were losing their women's tag team titles to the Iconics at WrestleMania. But according to Sasha Banks' husband, Mike Haas, whichever way you pronounce it, I apologize, that said tantrums never happened, neither backstage or in the hotel lobby or hotel floor outside their rooms. He posted a picture of his wife on Instagram with the caption saying, keep steady. No matter what you do, they will always find a way to justify their disdain. Let your silence speak volumes. Well, it's very encouraging and good to know that the husband has the best interest in protecting his wife, looking out for her. Time will tell, as right now, Sasha Banks, who was also originally scheduled for the European tour, has been removed. So they're at a stalemate, which I believe it was Meltzer who used that phrase. Just like last week, they're currently at a stalemate. So I just have to wait and see. Dominik Dijakovic has confirmed on a recent post on Instagram that he is going to be spending some time on the shelf with a knee injury. He recently suffered a torn meniscus, which is why he's not been seen or used on NXT TV. And the average or standard time to heal from this is about 3 months of rehab. No word if and when he will need surgery, but he's confident that going to physical therapy and rehab will be enough and to avoid surgery at all costs, because he's been having great momentum on NXT, pushing towards the North American Championship. So unfortunately, he has to be sidelined for a few. Speaking of NXT, Mauro Ranallo looks like he's not going anywhere, as he's re-signed and agreed to a new deal with the WWE and remain the NXT lead announcer. According to the Pro Wrestling Insider, the deal was initially agreed about a month ago, and that Ranallo will still be able to do outside work, such as commentating for MMA and boxing. Ranallo has been with the WWE since 2015, and 2 years later became the lead announcer in 2017 of NXT. Well, let's talk about Luke Harper here, as according to Dave Meltzer, he's stuck in limbo with the WWE, that he's not scheduled for any future bookings despite still being on a contract and the added extension until next year's or prior to next year's WrestleMania. Meltzer said that Harper met with McMahon and asked the chairman that if he wasn't going to be used, if he could be let out of his contract at the end of November, at the scheduled original expiration date and not the added 6 months. So McMahon, according to Meltzer, suggested to Harper to go speak to Triple H about it, but as of the end of his report, Triple H has yet to respond to Harper. So Triple H is too busy, according to Meltzer, to speak to anyone about their contractual status. I mean, Triple H is talent relations. He has JR's previous job. Cheddar had an interview with Carmella talking about her launching a new wine brand. As Carmella stated that she wanted to try something after 5 years in a ring, something new other than just wrestling continuously. She originally said, never thought she would be a wrestler, working as a professional cheerleader for several years before joining the WWE when they hired her. So the wine brand would be called Capo Caña, which Carmella loosely translates to boss bitch. Now, that sounds like a combination of Spanish and or Italian. I don't speak Italian. Caña is a Spanish word, but again, in Europe, I'm sure it means something else. So let's just give her the benefit of the doubt, and this is what the wine is going to be called, the boss bitch. Wonder if Sasha Banks is going to sue. But she states, Carmella does, that it's the perfect stance to take in the world today where women are taking over. Hence the boss bitch title for the wine. You know what? I'll give it a shot. She didn't give any more details as far as what flavor or whether it be a white or red wine. But if I ever see it somewhere, a supermarket or a wine cellar store, yeah, I'll pick it up. Hey, let me get a bottle of that boss bitch. Well, it's yet to appear on WWE.com about the show that's taking place in parts unknown later on in June. But Goldberg will be making his return to the WWE, presumably in a match. We've yet to know anything because nothing has been announced as far as the lineup goes. But Goldberg is expected to take that trip over there. And regarding possible opponents for him, Bobby Lashley took to Twitter tagging Goldberg saying, "So, I hear Goldberg is coming back." In which Goldberg responded to Lashley's Twitter with a fist emoji. So, are we going to see Goldberg versus Bobby Lashley? And how much of a match would it be if it's going to be similar to the one he had with Lesnar back at WrestleMania? So, all you single guys out there, pay attention. You might want to find this next story interesting. After rumors surfaced the last few weeks, it's been confirmed now by Ryan Satin that Alexa Bliss and Buddy Murphy have called off their engagement. Ryan Satin confirmed that the engagement was called off, noting that the source close to him saying that Bliss and Murphy have not been living together since September of 2018. But that Bliss remains a big fan and a friend to Murphy as a wrestler and a person, still keeping respect for each other. But unfortunately, the engagement has been terminated. So yes, Alexa Bliss is single. So if you or anyone thinks that they could tame the little princess, or what do they call her? The whatever. They got so many damn nicknames for everyone nowadays. It's hard to keep track. But yeah. But keep it safe, guys. Don't start stalking her like a few Sasha Banks fans have. Oh Lord, poor Sasha Banks. Even had people. If you remember the stories I shared here a bunch of times, there were fans that actually would give out fake names or say that they're related to Sasha Banks to find out her flight information, what time and where she'll be landing around the country. And yeah, there'll be fans waiting for her. It's ridiculous how far some of these people would go. And yeah, I travel to go see fans, but it's all scheduled in a meet and greet or a convention of some kind. Big freaking difference. So let's get into actually a lot of AEW news. As AEW has signed a deal to air the Double or Nothing event on ITV in the United Kingdom, the largest commercial television network in the UK, as they announced their partnership that will see a highly anticipated event to air live from the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas. And another announcement that came out this week, included in the press release, revealed a special 1 hour long pre-show broadcast called Buy In. So this would be their version of the kickoff show. The newly renamed Casino Battle Royale and a new match featuring Kip Sabian taking on Sammy Guevara during the pre-show. In the UK, the live actual pay-per-view event won't air until 1 a.m. the following day on Sunday the 26th. So, yeah, so far so good for All Elite Wrestling, having a TV deal at least across the pond. But back here in the States, it was announced that next week, Warner Media will be having a meeting, and the promotion AEW will likely see a weekly show on TNT. This comes according to The Wrap, that AEW and the Turner deal is, quote, virtually done. So next week, Warner Media is having a upfront meeting, and an hour before that meeting takes place, Tony Khan and some of AEW talent are expected to attend Madison Square Garden, where the meeting will be taking place, and to finalize, essentially, the TV deal with TNT. Of course, TNT is owned by Time Warner. This was way after the AOL Time Warner merger, and then the collapse of that deal, where essentially WCW was no more. Moving on with this story, it was also noted that the financial terms of the deal are not expected to be disclosed, as AEW is not a publicly traded company, but the weekly show is expected to debut this fall, so real soon. No word exactly what day of the week and the timeline, or the time slots, I should say, of when the new AEW TV show will be airing. For those who don't know, Tony Khan is a billionaire. I believe he's the co-owner of their stadium and runs the Jacksonville Jaguars. I could be mistaken, but it's something along those lines. I have to look that up. But it's safe to say that Tony Khan knows people and was part of some of these negotiations. And it's like, hey, we tried it before with WCW and saw what happened. Well, I'm sure part of that meeting had that conversation, and assuming that Cody Rhodes was part of it as well, chimed in, because Cody was there for a lot of that when Nitro was beating Raw in the ratings, and towards the end of what happened to its downfall. And a lot of people blame individuals, Bischoff, that bro guy, among others. But when you ask those people that are blamed individually, they're all saying, no, it was the AOL Time Warner merger deal. And that a lot of those people that were involved with that, first of all, Ted Turner was out of power. And second, a lot of those involved with that deal were not wrestling fans and just didn't see any reason to keep it alive. Especially by that time, the ratings have all been in a downfall. I think, I believe, and I always believe this, had WCW went dark like Bischoff wanted to for a few months, maybe for the rest of the year, and come back later somewhere else. But once the TV deal was pulled, there was nothing that Bischoff can do. And WCW wasn't worth anything. Step in Vince McMahon and bought it for about, depending who you ask, anywhere between $2 to $4 million. But great news for AEW. It's up and coming. I'm pretty sure their Double or Nothing show will be very successful. And then after that, all that stress and pressure will be off their shoulders, and now they can focus on TV deals and TV shows and storylines and all that, leading into whatever event on pay-per-view will be next. Maybe in September, All In 2, who knows, or maybe later on in the year. Chris Jericho appeared in a video message at the end of last Saturday's Wrestling Dantaku in Japan, challenged the current IWGP Heavyweight Champion Okada after just successfully retaining the championship against Sonata in their main event. And Jericho wants the match to take place at the Dominion event on June 9th. And to no one else's surprise, Okada accepted the challenge as he will now defend the title against Chris Jericho on June 9th in Osaka. So what does this all mean? Because at one point, it was reported that AEW will and does not have a working relationship with New Japan. Well, let's see what Dave Meltzer has to say, as he was discussing this on his latest Wrestling Observer Radio, that there is no change in the non-relationship between All Elite Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling. And again, this comes after Jericho issued a challenge to Okada. So this is what Meltzer had to say. It's not a AEW booking. It's not a sign that AEW and New Japan are working together. There is no relationship and there is no change in that except right now. Hopefully someday there will be, but right now that does not seem to be the case. So Meltzer says one thing, but clearly we saw another, that a contracted AEW superstar in Chris Jericho is challenging the New Japan Pro Wrestling World Heavyweight Champion to a match to take place a month from now. And that's going to be right after Double or Nothing. So is this more of a Chris Jericho deal that he still has commitments with New Japan and it was just never mentioned, or was this a last minute kind of thing? Who knows? But regardless of working relationship or not, I say keep it open mind about it, or maybe leave it open if it was never closed. I'm not saying do wild card rule bullshit, but the possibility and actually treating wrestlers as independent contractors to jump back and forth like this on occasion, yeah, just imagine the money it would generate for that company in Japan and the company here in the States. If and when, let's say, Jericho wins, for the sake of argument, he wins the IWGP Championship, defeating Okada, returns to the next AEW show or at the first ever AEW TV show, and then you have Okada jumping the railings or something like that, or Ibushi or anyone trying to bring back the title back to New Japan. All I'm saying, with a working relationship like this between two companies, the possibilities are endless when it comes to rivalries and feuds that can go across literally around the world. Also, on one last note about AEW, Former ECW World Heavyweight Champion Jerry Lynn has signed with the company, and according to Dave Meltzer, he will be not only an agent, but also one of their coaches. So kudos to Jerry Lynn, who is still with the business. He's still in the business, never really left. He is officially retired, but still good to know that he's not been forgotten. I met this man several times and could not be any nicer. So I guess following the footsteps of Mayor Kane, former Impact Wrestling star and WWE superstar Matt Morgan has become the mayor of Longwood, Florida. He won by a unanimous decision among the 5 city commissioners, and his term started immediately. And he gave out a statement following his victory, which I'll try to get to because it's pretty. No, actually, it's not too long. So here we go. I am humbled and grateful to my fellow commissioners for believing in me. Thank you to Ben Paris for introducing me to politics to begin with and encouraging me to go out into the community and be me. The first thing I did was flash back to grammar school, riding the special education bus and being made fun of. It was also made me feel lesser than others, but now has come full circle. I really believe if you are willing to put in the work, you are able to punch out your own ticket and do whatever you want to do with your life one day. I'm going to tell you the exact same thing I said when I was sworn into the office of the city commissioner a year and a half ago. We are a team of 5 here in Longwood. Each responsible represents one finger on one hand. And when you ball that up in form of a fist, an undeniable and impenetrable, unbreakable fist who carries out the wishes of our Longwood residents. So congratulations to Matt Morgan, the former Blueprint in Impact Wrestling. And unfortunately didn't have a good opportunity to have a great run in the WWE, although he'll be remembered as one of the members of Brock Lesnar's Survivor Series team as being probably the second biggest team, figuratively and literally speaking, of all time. But I never got to meet this man, but I wasn't aware that he had a political gene in him. And that's not to bring the man down, but, considering how we've seen him in front of TV cameras on wrestling shows, who knew? I didn't, but hey, it goes a long way to show that we can do physical activity in pro wrestling for so many years and then maybe have a previous passion, and it's not too late to go back to it. Again, he was introduced to it, as he said in his statement, but he fit in like a glove, and now he's a mayor. A freaking mayor. Well, congratulations to Matt Morgan. Deadline is reporting that Dean Ambrose has been cast in an upcoming MMA movie called Cage Fighter. It's not too original, but anyway, as he joins the cast of former MMA talents such as Georges St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, and Alexander Gustafsson. The story is about a cage fighter who focuses on the MMA championship and loses it to a pro wrestler, and now must work his way back up the ranks in MMA and will try to go for a rematch. It sounds like a Rocky story, to be honest, but hey, it's the world of MMA. I guess that would be the little twist in it. But interesting. I mean, it's not often that we have athletes have these kind of roles on a regular basis and able to test the waters, if you will. I know Georges St. Pierre had a few roles, especially in Winter Soldier and most recently in the Kickboxer remake with Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's in his element when it comes to these fight scenes. His acting skills, I know he does have a very heavy accent, but he can pull it off. Ambrose, was he ever part of the Marine saga? I know he did a movie with WWE Studios. I just can't remember which one it was. But regardless, it does open up the opportunities for athletes, MMA wrestlers, what have you, to have this opportunity. And I'll be curious to watch this Cage Fighter movie when it comes out. So Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com has reported that there were several reasons behind Eli Drake's out of nowhere firing from Impact Wrestling, as reported here a few weeks ago on the JM Report. But according to Sapp, one of the final straws did indeed end up with Drake refusing to work against Tessa Blanchard in a intergender match. Initially, it was believed by many to be a work, but the matter ended up being very much a shoot, and both parties weren't made aware of the match being made until it was announced. It was originally set up by Moose, but he refused. So Drake reportedly had heat with management, including Scott Del More. But from there, other reasons seem to have circulated into Drake's firing from the company. So according to a source with Fightful, that Drake's statement being written off television or into oblivion by the writing team made many feel that was not favorable for the staff. In addition to that, referencing back to the intergender situation was made, where Drake also stated that Killer Cross would destroy Jordynne Grace in a fight. And all this reporting led to Drake being fired via email. Finally, Fightful is being told that Impact is trying to lock Drake down into a 1-year no-compete clause due to the termination. Well, if the last bit is especially true, we're not going to see Eli Drake go anywhere. Not NXT, not AEW, not New Japan, anywhere. For another full year. Maybe a little bit more than that, depending on what's left on his contract. Who knows? Maybe there'll still be an opportunity or another way to resolve this thing and have Eli Drake do something. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Well, I'll end on this note. WWE will be teaming up with WXW out of Pennsylvania for Samoa Anawani's fundraiser. The event is being put together to help raise money for Anawani, who unfortunately is suffering through stage 4 liver cancer. Such names as Samoa Joe, Michael Hayes, Cassius Ohno, and more will be heading to Allentown at the end of the month for the event. Now, according to 411mania.com, there will be different meet and greets at different times of the day. From 2 to 4 p.m., there is a VIP gold ticket meet and greet with Samoa Joe, Cassius Ohno, Michael Hayes, Billy Kidman, and WWE referee Sean Bennett for $100, where you can use your own camera for a photo with each talent and get one item signed. For any additional signed items, it will be an extra $20. For the gold ticket holders, from 4 to 6 p.m., there will be the silver meet and greet with the Samoan dynasty of Tonga Kid, Manu, Afa, the Wild Samoan, Lance Anawani, and the Haitian Warrior, along with Tommy Dreamer, Terry Reynolds, and former WXW heavyweight champion Gene Snitsky, and Ace Austin, all for $75. Again, using your own camera, having one autograph taken with each talent, and having an autograph item signed. Any other additional autographs to be signed will be an extra $20. There is also the silver tickets. By the way, all of these VIP include tickets to the event. There was also a $150 platinum VIP super ticket package, giving entry to both meet and greets throughout the day. And of course, tickets to the event, the meet and greet, photographs and pictures taken, autographs as well to sign items. There will be 73 platinum packages available. For fans who want to meet certain talents, WXW is charging a $20 admissions fee for the meet and greets with the ability to purchase 8x10s and specific autographs as well. So far, there is no word on any lineup for the evening and which other talents will be announced and competing as well. So, for further information and to order your meet and greets in advance, email wstcenterpa@aol.com. Once again, wstcenterpa WXWPA@AOL.com. And for more information on the event itself, head over to WXW's Facebook page at World Extreme Wrestling C4. That's Extreme X-TREME. World Extreme Wrestling C4. And the event itself will take place on May 29th, starting at 7 p.m. It's for a good cause. I've been very fortunate to have worked projects with members of the WXW out here in the Mineola, Florida area, as they do have a other Wild Samoan Pro Wrestling Training Center there as well. And yeah, I would give anything to attend the show myself and also do my part in helping out a wrestling legend in Samu Anawani and to help him out best as possible for him to get well soon. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening in. I want to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day this weekend. Enjoy yourselves. I know some places in the country are having bad weather, but do the best that you can in showing how much you appreciate Mom. Barbecues, Chuck E. Cheese, whatever your plans are, you enjoy. So this is Good Old JM. Until next time.
Open your mind and realize that your beautiful world could take my life. And I'm sinking under, drowning faster. Please just let me breathe.